Alright, so the next step is that we need to find out how much should each country produce. So at this point, we know that the United States has a comparative advantage in the production of links, and Canada has a comparative cost advantage in the production of links. And again, why is that? Because if you take a look at the PPF, you take any arbitrary point and then you ask yourself, how many links would Canada have to give up if it wants to produce an extra bun? And then you see it is 1/2. So you would go here, plus 1 bun, and then you would see Canada would have to give up only 0.5 links. But if we do the same thing for the United States, plus 1 bun, they have to give up an entire link. So therefore Canada has a comparative cost advantage in the production of buns. And if we do the same thing for links, we will see that Canada has to give up 2 buns for every link, but the United States only 1. Okay, so now how do we identify how each country shall specialize? And we can do that in 3 steps. So whenever you try to optimize something or you try to find an optimum solution, you always start with the constraint which is the most severe. So the most severe constraint is Canada, because Canada can only produce 6 buns if it fully specialized. So Canada has a comparative cost advantage in buns. If Canada's produced 6 buns, then this is less than what the United States could do if it produced links. So the United States could produce 8 links, so that's less of a constraint. So therefore we start with Canada and we say step 1 is let Canada produce 6 buns, because that is where it has a comparative cost advantage, and 0 links. Okay, so that's the easiest. So let Canada specialize at this point here. That would be the point of production. Okay, so now the second step is, maybe that's a little bit too big now. So step 2 would be to say, so we know Canada is the biggest constraint, and let them fully specialize what they can do the best. So then step 2 is let USA match or produce, let the USA match Canada's production of 6 buns with 6 links. Okay, so now they specialize, and so now let's say we are here. Let's make that maybe in the blue color. Okay, but if the United States now produces also 6 links, so now we have already 6 buns and 6 links, so that allows for 6 hot dogs. But you can see that now the United States is still producing inside its production possibility frontier, which means it still has some idle resources. Well, how many idle resources does it have? It has still 2 workers left. So in order to produce 6 links, it only takes 6 workers. So the United States has now 2 workers. And what those 2 workers that are not allocated yet, they will be like in a third step. So like in a third step, they will be allocated towards the production of 1 additional bun and 1 link. Because we can draw here, a second 45-degree line, which says after we produce 6 links, let's produce, with the remaining resources that we have, the 2 workers, the same number of buns and links, because we need to make sure that at the very end, we trade hot dogs, or we want to eat hot dogs. So we always need to make sure that there is an equal number of links and buns. So therefore, third step is let USA use its excess resources, which is now 2 workers, to produce one extra link and 1 extra bun. So that means that the final optimum level of production for the United States will be here, not there. So I can erase that again. That was just step 2. Okay. So now this blue dot is where the United States should produce. And now you can see that we have 6 buns produced from Canada, plus another bun produced by the United States, and the United States produces 7 links. So in total we have now 7 buns and 7 links. Okay, let's fill out that table. So the United States, we said, produces 1 bun, which is here, and 7 links. And Canada produces 6 buns and no links. And now we see we have a total of 7 buns and 7 links, which is the resources that we have now available in order to produce 7 hot dogs. And if you remember, under autarky, the countries, they could only produce 6 hot dogs. But now through specialization, we have the option to produce 7 hot dogs. But now we need to trade. And how do we trade? That is something I will discuss in the next video. But what you should have learned on this slide is how should they specialize. And we did that in 3 steps. We started with the constraint, which bites the most, or which is the most severe, which is Canada. Because Canada, if it fully specializes, can produce much less than the United States if it fully specialized. So in the first step, we let Canada produce 6 buns, and they are now fully specialized. Then in the second step, we let the United States produce 6 links, but then the United States still has some extra resources available, and those extra resources are being used to produce again equal numbers of links and buns in order to make sure that we end up in the world with the same number of links and buns so that we can have hot dogs. Okay, so I'll stop here, and in the next slide, we will discuss how they should trade.